this video, we're going to explore some simple tips for sowing with success under cover. Let's start the growing season as we mean to go on, and it all begins with those precious seeds.
Starting seedlings off under the protection of a greenhouse, polythene tunnel or cold frame enables eager gardeners to get a head start on the growing season. Sowing under cover, while conditions outside are still less than ideal, means you can raise strong, healthy seedlings safe from chilly winds and pests. Greenhouses and similar structures trap the sun's warmth and hold on to it for longer, making nights less cold while significantly raising the temperature on sunny days, effectively bringing the start of the growing season forward by up to a month. For the very earliest start, however, you can't beat the convenience of an indoor windowsill. Sow into pots or smaller flats or seed trays such as these, anything that'll sit on the windowsill. Tender crops like peppers and tomatoes may benefit from the added warmth and humidity of a propagator, or recreate these conditions by securing clear plastic over the top of the pot with an elastic band. Trays of cold season crops, everything from onions to celery to cabbage, don't need quite so much mollycoddling. You can even stack trays up like this after sowing to save on space. After 2 or 3 days, start checking daily for signs of germination, then move them out to the greenhouse or cold frame to continue growing. Or you can continue to grow seedlings on indoors using grow lights to ensure strong, even growth. Seed flats or trays are useful for sowing very tiny seeds like basil or easy to transplant flower seeds, which can then be moved on to their own pots or plug trays once they're big enough to handle. Their compact size makes very efficient use of space during this first stage of growth. Plug trays, on the other hand, minimise root disturbance and save time, because often seedlings can go straight from the tray to their final growing positions. Plug trays come in all shapes and sizes. Those with larger plugs are great for sowing chunkier seeds such as beans, while a plug tray like this is just the job for sowing lettuce, radish, onions and other crops with smaller seeds. Well-made trays of rigid plastic can potentially last for many years, but if you want to avoid plastic, look for alternatives made of biodegradable fibre or make your own pots out of newspaper. Use any quality all-purpose potting mix. If it's a bit lumpy, screen or sieve it to give a finer, more even texture suitable for sowing. Fill the trays with the potting mix, pushing it down into the plugs with your fingers so it's nice and firm. Then add a little more of the potting mix. Now make shallow depressions with your fingertips like this. Most seeds don't need to be sown especially deep, with a covering of around 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimetre about right for most crops. Drop seeds into the depressions you've made. Many vegetables, including common crops such as salads, onions, beets, peas and radish, may be sown in pinches of 3 to 5 seeds per plug for planting out as a cluster of seedlings. Larger seeds like beans are sown individually into deeper holes made with a finger, pencil or stick. Once you're done sowing, add a little more potting mix over the top, gently skimming over the surface of the tray to ensure all the seeds are buried. Water trays carefully using a watering can or hose pipe fitted with a rose. Go over the trays a couple of times so that the potting mix is completely moistened through. Label trays with the variety and date of sowing. You could recycle old popsicle or lollipop sticks for this, or cut strips from an old plastic tub. You can now leave trays as they are, or cover them over with a sheet of glass, wood or cardboard, which will slow evaporation and reduce interest from rodents such as mice, which have a habit of digging up and eating bigger seeds. Know when to sow. Sow too early on in the season and you'll end up having to pot on plants more often because conditions outside still aren't suitable. This is a waste of potting mix and puts pressure on valuable space under cover. Our garden planner can help. Use the plant list that accompanies your garden plan to judge the perfect time to sow and plant in your location. The blue lines show when sowing can begin under cover, while the green lines indicate the range of dates for planting or sowing outdoors. In this garden, for example, lettuce may be sown from the second half of February to plant outside a month later, while onions can be sown from mid-January. But for quick-growing pumpkins and squash, it's best to wait until the beginning of May so plants aren't too big before they can go outside. Check trays and pots regularly for moisture. Lifting them up is a good way to judge how much moisture there is in the potting mix. If it's light, water. One way to achieve a thorough watering is to pop trays into a reservoir to soak up water through their drainage holes. Remove them once you can see it's moist at the surface.
You can't beat the satisfaction that comes with those first sowings, and you know spring is almost here when those first shoots push through. In our next video, we'll be looking at how to transplant pot or tray raised seedlings into their own containers for growing on. There'll be more on preparing seedlings for planting out and the best way of getting them off to a strong start in their new home. Don't miss out, subscribe and make sure you're one of the first to watch it once it's out. I'll catch you next time.
Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and every year I start a whole bunch of my seedlings in trays like these inside the house in a protected environment before I move them out to my greenhouses here. But if you're new to starting seeds indoors, you should know that there are 3 distinct stages to their growth, each requiring their own environmental conditions. I'm going to put up a chart right now which will in fact spoil the whole video, but I'll go through it step by step just so you know what I mean by each of these entries. Your total time of starting indoors is generally from 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost in your area. So you can look that up online, look up last frost, put in your area. It'll tell you what that last expected frost date is, and you can time back from 6 to 8 weeks before that time. If you start any sooner than that, it can get a little bit tricky because they will be growing in these and the seedlings will be getting larger and harder to control in an environment like this. Harder to keep from stretching, harder to keep from overgrowing their cells in the plug trays. And that's the way I prefer to start them. So 6 to 8 weeks is the time to begin. Now these 3 distinct stages I'm going to talk about. The first one is germination. The second one I'm talking about is early development. And the third one is hardening off, and all 3 are necessary. As you can see by the chart, it starts out with high temperatures and high humidity and not too much air movement, and as you move through the stages, you lower that temperature, you lower that humidity, and you increase the air movement to match what the seedlings can expect outside. So, step by step, let's first go through germination. So this is the stage where you're giving those seeds a perfect condition to crack or to open up, send out their first root, which is called a radicle, and send out their first leaves, which are called cotyledons. Those first leaves may not look like the eventual leaves of the plant. They're generally quite simple and quite round, and then the second set of leaves, or the first true leaves that come out, generally look like the plant that you were trying to grow. During this stage, the most important thing is that you have high humidity and high temperatures. Light isn't so important, air movement is minimal, watering none, you're just relying on the moisture. In fact, it is important not to be too wet in this stage. You just try to be moist and humid and give the seedlings enough moisture to pull from their environment, but not so much that they will begin to rot. And there is no fertilizer required in this stage. As for timing, typically, and this depends on temperature a little bit and also on the type of seed, typically it can take from 10 days to 2 weeks on average for your seeds to come out of, to come into growth. Temperatures on average might be around 77 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius is about an average of what most seeds like as their optimum temperature for germination. Now, it varies a little bit by variety, but that's a pretty good middle of the road thing, and that's pretty reasonable to achieve in an indoor environment. I can achieve that fairly easily just by using a nearby space heater and also using a humidifier. Some people use a lot of things like doming or tenting their seedlings, which is perfectly fine as well. Other people use a much larger custom germination chamber, so they'll have many shelves and they'll stick all of their seedlings in there. They'll tent them all together, they'll raise the temperature all together, and they'll keep the humidity up inside of there, either through a humidifier or, again, once you just enclose seedlings with moist soil and a tent, you'll get up to 100% humidity almost immediately. The second stage that we have to talk about here is early development. Now, what does this look like? Well, I mentioned in the germination stage, you would see the first cotyledons, the first leaves. You'd see some radical development. This is when you see them continue their development. You'll sometimes see their first true leaves come up very quickly after those cotyledons. You'll see the stems elongating. You'll see further root development. But basically, once they've cracked, once they've germinated, you want to start moving them over to these conditions. You'll be leaving them in these conditions for up to 4 weeks, and you want to drop that temperature right away. If you don't drop the temperature right away and the humidity right away, you'll see those seedlings begin to stretch almost immediately. They'll go a bit yellow, they'll start stretching towards the light. That's another important point at this point, is to give them as much light as you can give them. If you have a bright windowsill, that's probably the right spot for them. If you have artificial light, I would recommend it. It keeps them more compact during the stage, especially if you're keeping them inside the house for up to 4 weeks. They could stretch an awful lot by then with the weak light of early season window light. The temperatures, I'll give you the specifics. I usually drop it down to about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or that's about 18 degrees Celsius around this time. You can actually stage it down a little bit lower if that's possible for you to do. If you do it in a basement room or some other unheated area of the house, you can drop it down a little bit lower just to keep that stretch down and keep the development rate slow enough that you can manage it. At this point, it's also important to start introducing some moderate amounts of air movement. Just a gentle fan on the leaves, just to keep the stems moving around a little bit, will help to thicken up those stems and get them ready for what's coming, which is the hardening off stage, where they're exposed to environmental conditions of outdoors. Watering at this point is infrequent. Remember, they just came from germinating early on. They're not going to need a whole ton of water to keep moisture in that soil. They're not using a lot of moisture at this point, so it's infrequent. And as you've had them in there for 4 weeks, if they start to develop a little bit more, they're getting a little fuller, you may have to keep a better eye on that, but it's infrequent to begin with for sure. And on fertilizer, well, the seeds come with a package of fertilizer in them, or a package of energy in them, where your seedlings don't need a whole ton of fertilizer at first. Now again, if you're keeping them inside the house for this stage, which is about 4 weeks, by the end of that, they may need some fertilizer, and you want to start transitioning them into feeding a little bit to improve the root development and so on. So I would say at this stage, it's none at first, but as you get towards the end of that 4 weeks, you might be introducing fertilizer at a quarter strength or half strength. If you're using a liquid feed fertilizer, they'll usually have those the full strength listed on the side of the package, and then you can just dilute that by half or by 3/4 to get the right strength for new seedlings. Finally, after you've done all of this, you want to go into a hardening off stage, and this is important too. Of the total time that you've had it in there, 2 weeks in germination, roughly 4 weeks of growing on and early development, the final 2 weeks or the final week, depending on how extreme your outdoor environment is or how different it is from your indoor environment, you want to give it some time to get used to what it's going to expect outside. It would be a real shame to grow your plants for 6 or 7 weeks, put them outside, and then have them all keel over, which is not an exaggeration, or burn off their leaves because you put them out too quickly and they weren't accustomed to those temperatures or air movement or low humidity. So you're doing a further lowering of the temperature, and you're doing a slow exposure to outdoor environment. This takes 1 to 2 weeks, and usually the temperatures I'm targeting at this point indoors, if I can manage it, if I'm for the daytime or for the nighttime when I'm keeping them inside, if I can keep it down low, like in the range of 54 degrees Fahrenheit or 12 degrees Celsius, that's kind of ideal. Daytimes, if you can manage the work to do it, the best thing is to actually move them outside to the outdoor environment. Usually it's a little bit warmer outside in the days. Obviously don't choose the worst of the windiest, of the coldest and sharpest days outside. But if you can find a day where the environment outside is reasonable, put them out, expose them to full sun, expose them to the movement of the wind. At this stage, watering and fertilizer, you're trying to move them more towards what you would treat a regular plant plant and water as needed. At this point, they have been inside for 4 weeks, and so they've grown up quite a bit. You may have to check for watering, depending on the cell size that you're using. You may have to check for watering every day or two, and fertilizer at this point should be moving towards half strength or even up to full strength at this stage. Now, after you've done your germination, after you've done your early development, after you've done your hardening off, you move them outside. You're going to be using them for either putting directly into the garden, or you're transplanting them into pots for further growth. So your job is done for the early seedling development. At that point, it's kind of the stage of growing on, and I have another video that talks about growing on plants in pots if you're interested in that one. Otherwise, you take it from here. All right, that's it for me on how you should use your first 3 stages of seed development. If you have any questions on that, some things I didn't discuss in this video would be seed pre-treatment or collection, or again, some of those early stages after growing on. You can ask me those questions down in the comments of the video, and thanks so much for watching.
Before starting the land preparation, check field history, soil quality, and water availability. Clear the field of weeds and crop debris. Remove the stones and rocks before plowing. If possible, check the pH and do a soil test for NPK to decide on field improvement. If the pH is too low, consider liming. When laying out the beds, consider field topography, sunlight, and wind direction. You can use stakes, measuring tapes, and string. Level the beds and establish a good canal system for irrigation and drainage. Add well-decomposed manure or any available organic fertilizers. Do the land preparation 15 days before transplanting. After land preparation, put in place drip irrigation and mulch. Watch our videos on those topics.
Dear students, so far we have discussed about the different implements and their design, their operation in the field. We have also talked of the various mechanics of the implement with respect to the soil and so on and so forth. Now we will talk of the use of the soil, which is the most important part when you are talking of farm machinery in the whole gamut of crop production. We will follow the slides which are there. So, the lecture which I have planned today is simply an introduction of seed operation. Now, you see, it is very essential to know how this operation is done and what are the various aspects of this. What I have planned is that in a very basic way we will follow the slides, and then over the period of the length of the course we will come to the higher level of machines and equipment which are designed and what are the unique features which are there in these machines. Well, sowing of seeds. Well, you must have seen that if you want to sow a seed, even your mothers might have done in the kitchen garden. If you see the seeds of tomato or potato or brinjal or something, when you throw it, simply it grows. So, that is one way that anything which you sow or throw, it will simply grow. But there are certain aspects of this sowing, because we want an organized amount of crop to be taken out of a certain area of the field. So, seeding is in fact an art. Seeding or sowing is an art, that is placing the seeds. It is an art of placing the seeds. How should you place the seeds? Where should you place the seeds? What should be the location of this? What time it should be of the climate it should be placed, and so on and so forth. So that what we get is a good germination, because whatever has been sown need not be all germinating. There are many factors to that: the condition of the soil, the moisture content of the soil, the orientation of the seed which has gone, the type of the seed, the condition of the seed itself. The seed may not be a good quality seed, so it may not germinate. If we have not checked the viability of the seed, then also there will be a problem. So, it is very important. So, this seeding is definitely an art to put the seeds in the soil in such a way that a good germination takes place, and hence a good health of the crop. This is what important is. So, perfect seeding gives us what will it give? It will give certain aspects which we are looking for when we are talking of a good crop. Correct amount of seed per unit area. Yes, we want that in an area certain amount of crop must be, certain amount of seed must be thrown or must be sown, because we are interested to get a certain amount of total population in a given area, and that is very important for the yield. And this has been researched over various long period of time, where we have seen that in a particular area you definitely require a certain optimum amount of plant protection to get a good quality of yield or a total amount of yield, which is important. Moreover, depth at which the seeds should be placed in the soil. Well, it is not that we simply sow the seeds and throw the seeds on the surface. There has to be a location of this seed within the soil. There could be various factors. If you are not looking at this and then sow the seeds, definitely the seeds may be taken away by birds, etc., or maybe by wind, etc. It may be blown to several other locations in the field, and it will be very much haphazard. So, what we want actually is that it should be placed at the proper depth, and then spacing between the row to row and plant to plant. Well, this is also important when we are talking that the seeds should be placed at a certain depth in the soil. It should be also placed with respect to its adjacent seed, where it should be placed, because when you keep the seeds together, 2, 3, 4 seeds together, they will grow, but they may not get enough nutrients to grow and flourish. When the tillerings, etc., when they come, you will find that there is a competition between these, and these will then not give a good health of the plant overall. So, we would like that what is the location it has to be sown, what spacing we have to maintain, and how much to be sown. This is very important. Methods of sowing. Well, as I told you that if you just throw the seeds, definitely they will grow, but there are certain methods, certain procedures to be followed, which will give you what you required earlier, which I said that we will require a certain population, plant population. One is a very simple one, it is shown over here. Broadcasting, you simply throw the seeds, somebody takes the seeds in the bucket or a basket and then goes all over the field and throws the seeds. This is known as broadcasting, which is random scattering of the seeds, which means random scattering of seeds on the surface of the seed bed. Maybe it can be done manually, it could be done mechanically also. And in fact, if you see maybe about 80-100 years back or so, when there were simple plows, many seeds were simply broadcast for sowing. Now, what are the disadvantage of that? In fact, it will have the same disadvantage which we talked of the advantage in the previous slide. Higher seed rate, definitely you will not know how much to be sown where and what exactly should be the optimum value of the seed rate which should be sown. So, you will put somewhere more, somewhere less, because it is all manual and random which has been thrown. Therefore, there will be loss of the seeds, unnecessary seeds. If you are throwing fertilizer along with that will be also a loss. Production, there will be production loss. Then higher weed growth. Yes, this is another important thing which must be looked into. Look, see, we are sowing a certain crop seed, but then along with that we get that other unwanted crop grows up. We have not sown, and in fact what we did once, I had tried in one of my area to sow only the weeds, and we found that the weeds did not grow, but some other kind of crop grow. So, it is very important to know that along with the weeds which are there are certain unwanted weed comes, and that has to be removed, and this will happen in this case. So, since you have thrown it like this haphazardly, randomly, you would like that there should be a minimum competition of the nutrients of the soil to the particular required plant and not the not required plant. So, there is a need for removing out those unwanted plants. So, you would definitely like to have interculture operation, or we would like that this should be the weeds should be removed or the growth of weeds should be minimized. This is what we would like to do. What are other methods? One we have talked about, another is dibbling. This is a very old method and practiced by our ancestors when they wanted the seeds to be put at some location in the field. It used to be, I had seen, it used to be about a quadrant in which the actually pointers are put and the person can simply operate it, and the holes will be made, and in those holes you can use, say for example, it is given over here. See here, see these are the different holes which are made, and these holes are made by the dibbler or dibbling equipment. Here is a manually operated dibbler. You can see here that this is the cone which will enter. There is a seed here, and this is, I mean, there is location by which we can using this handle we can make the seeds drilled over there, or you can make a hole and drill later. But these are some of the ones which are being used. Different names are given depending upon the situation, depending on people who have designed these. So, you can say Namin dibbler, rotary dibbler, sometimes depending upon the design. Fact remains that they simply wanted that placing the seeds in the holes made in the seed bed and cover them. That was the aim, so that individual seeds could be very precisely kept at the required depth, and so they will get the nutrients from the soil and then grow with sufficient amount of spacing between the seed to seed, so that both the seeds or all the seeds around the process, around the location will grow and give a good crop. Drilling. Now, we have talked of random, we have talked of giving seeds through single seeds through dribbling. Now, drilling. Drilling is also a process of dropping seeds. It is said here, it is a process of dropping seeds in the furrow lines in a continuous flow and covering them by the soil. This is drilling. We must have heard of several seed drills, because we are drilling. Here also we are not maintaining any spacing between the seeds. So, you can say there is also a randomness here in this case as well, because here we are drilling continuously, it is very written continuously. But one way this is very helpful for achieving proper depth, proper spacing and proper amount of seed may be sown between the cell. Well, proper spacing may not be achieved as such, but we definitely see that when we have a drilling machine, some sort of scattering will take place, and then you may not be in a position to maintain that unless you are talking of a very precise equipment by which you are in a position to put the seeds at exact location. But then definitely it can put at the proper place or proper depth of these seeds, very important, because proper depth is very important, because it must get a congenial atmosphere, a environment it must get, the seed must get a congenial atmosphere, so that we are in a position to give this and allow the seed to grow. There are various methods which are all these methods, it is imperative for you to have a look at it, because as the first course on seeding operation, you must know what are the traditional ones, what are the future ones, and what are the methods which people have been using in various parts of the country. So, you can see here that the sowing by this behind the plow, then manual drawn seed drill, then bullock drawn here, and then of course the power sources which are very important, and now definitely these are going to help us in timeliness of operations and do the operation in short duration of time, and give us more yield, and say that we can solve the problem of shortage of labor and things like that. It will also economize on the total operation. So, inputs will be also minimized. So, this and this. Planting. Well, we had talked of drilling, throwing the seeds, etc. Now, we are talking of planting. Here slight accuracy is maintained. When we are talking of planting, we are trying to maintain certain level of accuracy of the seeds, placement of the seeds. We would like that the seeds should be placed at certain position with respect to the next seed, and a certain number as well. And this could be that a seed could be there, it could be a group of seeds, or maybe we can have some of the crops, for example lettuce or other vegetable crops, you would like to put them into say seedlings, and then this could be planted, it is possible. So, multiple seeds, single seeds or multiple seeds, and then what are the different methods, planting methods, the flat planting, furrow planting, raised bed planting, check row. Now, which way planting could be done? You can see that, say this is a field over here, and in this field you can have all these types. For example, flat planting, say these plants could be there onto a flat land like this. Furrow, you can have these. So, maybe plants are into this. This is the furrow. Raised bed, well, you can have the like this, you can have here plants, maybe one or two. Check row planting, we will see check row, that we will here check row, we will try to maintain a certain row to row, plant to plant distance. It could be also put into like this, and here you will maintain a certain this way, and then this way maybe, then we will be in a position to use the check row. We will go to the next slide to have a look at this more. Where planting, I have said there that planting could be of various types and various ways by which we do this planting. In this say flat planting method, seeds are sown on the flat surface, as I have shown, that example is given over here, and the irrigation is applied on the field through either through flood irrigation, sprinkler irrigation or drip irrigation. Now, it is very important also that when you have sown these seeds and you have taken care of their environment of depth of operation, maybe if the fertilizer is being used, you should location of the fertilizer, etc., and then you have also taken care of the places so that you can do interculture operation through that. But now you should also think of how you will irrigate that, because a time will be there when you would like to irrigate the plants and give a certain amount of water to that. So, this type of planting will help you in giving the irrigation whatever we want, a floodway, sprinkler or whatever. Generally predominates when natural moisture conditions are predominant. Flat planting, yes, flat planting definitely we want where the moisture content is not a problem and it is already there. So, we would prefer flat planting, but some locations we have other situations like you have to maintain the moisture, or you do not have to, or you have to have certain drainage, or in those conditions you will have to have furrows and then you have the raised bed which will be required. Now, machines for flat planting. Now, what are the different machines for flat planting? What they are and how do they behave, how they are designed. This is one aspect which as a designer, as an engineer, you would like to make the changes in the design and see that the operation is smooth, operation is efficient, and it is as accurate as possible as you required for the precision application of that particular seed or the fertilizer, whatever you are looking for. So, horizontal plate planter, vertical plate planter, inclined plate planter. There are three types of these planters are there, because this actually means that the seeding plate which is going to deliver the seed from the seed hopper, there will be seed hopper. There will be a seed hopper for the seeds onto this. Now, from this seed hopper ultimately onto the ground, when you want the seeds to be here, what are the methodology you should apply from this? What should you do? Whether you should have a simple opening, it could be a simple opening by which you can leave it and then the seeds will fall, or you can have a horizontal plate in which the seeds are taken and then they are delivered at a certain location and they go to this in the soil, or you can have a plate which is vertical and then that vertical plate is moving inside the seed hopper itself, picks up the seeds on its periphery and then discharges the seeds, or you can have inclined plate. Now, these are the different types which are used as per the crops depending upon the design of the whole planter and design of the type of the seed which we have taken. So, it is very important to use all these. Furrow planting and lister planting, where I just discussed earlier that what we should do in furrow and why we should do furrow, and irrigation is applied into the furrow. This is very good, that because in this we need the irrigation to be in the furrow. Well, this method is generally used in semi-arid areas where the moisture is one problem, and we need to get into this. Bed planting, well, as shown earlier in the slides, I have shown you that raised bed. You would like to have bed planting where you have clear information and clear cut spaces left for the other operations to be carried, whether it is irrigation or interculture operation, and enough space for the crops to grow. This is there. These are generally done in high rainfall areas because you require a certain drainage, because these are on the beds, and the drainage, if it is there through the depression or the furrow, the water could be drained and you get a good quality of the plant and hence the field. So, furrow planting, raised bed planters are used. Transplanting, well, these are one when we are talking of seeds, where we are talking of broadcasting of seed, we are talking of putting the seeds together, and then we are now talking of seeds for any type of crop. Now, it may also happen that in some cases, particularly in vegetables and other, we would like that certain amount of seedling is raised, and that seedling should be used for that for planting. So, when this is done, that a certain location we grow the seedlings of a particular seed and then pick up those seedlings and then transplant at other locations. This process is called transplanting. See, transplanting consists of preparing seedlings in nursery. The location where we prepare, we call that as a nursery or a location, and then planting these seedlings in the prepared field, in the field in which actually we want, and that way definitely we save lot of the total amount of seed we save here. It is mostly followed for paddy very largely. You might have seen, although you have not read this course, but if you have seen in your area and around how the seedlings are done, particularly for paddy. Similarly for vegetables and flowers also, the seedlings are grown and then they are grown into actual location of the field, and the places where they are grown, they are known as nursery. So, we call nursery raising of the seedlings and then transplanting, removing them from their location and then putting in the right field where they are to be actually done. Here some of the operations which are done manually. You can see that mostly this operation of planting is done manually here, and mostly these ladies are done. The most difficult part, and this is given to the ladies. This is the nursery here. Then some of the equipment. This is the equipment which is being largely used here. It is self-propelled transplanter. It is very effective, and for the last 10-15 years, in fact, this has become a boon to the transplanting operation. And well, cost could be a factor for small farmers, but then on a custom hiring basis, such machines are being used on large scale in several parts of the country. We have also shown you a manually operated device here. Manually operated device about 2 row or so. So, this device has been developed, which we think that if the person is operating instead of this bent posture, if he operates in a standing posture over here, so maybe you will find that it is easier for him. So, from safety point of view, it is easier if he operates this. Hill dropping. Well, sometimes we can drop the seeds, a group of seeds into hills, and better way of locating these seeds in the environment. This is another way of doing this work has been done at IIT Kharagpur, and we are trying to do this job precisely in the using this operation. Another system which has been long there in the literature, you will find tape seeding. That means the seeds are put in a water soluble tape, and that is spread into this soil, and maybe about within 2-3 minutes the soil this tape actually decomposes and the seeds are clear. The beauty of this is that you maintain certain seed to seed spacing. There is no problem, even if it is an irregular shape of the seed, you can use it. But yes, if you want to change the spacing, there is a problem. You will have to decide the spacing initially and then only put the seeds at the tapes. What is disadvantage is that see, you require about 20 kilometers of this total length of reels made of those seed tape rolls, and then per hectare. So, in 1 hectare area you will have to have about 20 kilometers of this length of tapes prepared and then carry. So, and the cost is also involved. So, these are some of the disadvantages. Of course, these are not very much in vogue in any part of the world, but then they were designed earlier. Check row planting, I have already said that what is this check row planting and how we are in a position to grow the seeds. We maintain a certain distance between the plants. Have a look at this. You can see here that we maintain the same distance here, and it depends on the type of the crop, it depends on which, it has several other advantages. Although you see that features of this is that it is time consuming and labor requirement is very high. Well, these are in fact all the operations, field operations definitely require labor and time consuming anyway, whether you are talking of a machine or you are talking of this. Because of the viscoelastic material which is your soil, and you are not aware of the quality of the soil, you are not aware of the actual what is the seed bed after 15 centimeter below the soil, what is the hard pan which is there, you do not know. So many complications lead us to say that definitely these operations are time consuming, and then these operations are also labor intensive. But then within these limitations, we are trying to see that how much we can maintain this and say that, well, these operations could be contained in within the time. A seed drill. Now we just talked of the various aspects. What do? You have to have a location where you keep a seed. Then after that the seed has to be metered. Then you need different types of a metering mechanism. Then this metering mechanism should be in a position to place the seeds at a certain location. Now if this equipment has to be created, what will be the various components? Those are shown over here. I will just go through this. You can always have a look at it, because this particular slide is self-explanatory and all the components are given here, but then I will just look hurriedly into this. The seed hopper will be there, then the connection with the 3-point linkage of the tractor, the furrow tube, the furrow openers which are there, the furrow tines which are here, then the transmission system, because you have a transmission system which is taken from the ground wheel here, and then it will help in operation of the seeding metering unit which is over here. Then the frame, and of course boot here, it helps is maintaining and so that you get the seed properly and have cover of that. And these are the functions of the seed drill. Definitely it will carry the seeds in the hopper, open the furrow, then meter the seeds, place the seeds at the real depth, and then operates. In fact, you should see that the seed is definitely pressed and then loose covered, because it has been also seen in literature that you need about 34 to about 69 kilopascal of pressing of the seeds in the soil. People have done this research on the various aspects of the soil cohesion and the other aspects of soil, and found out that you require such a because for emergence of this, that is called the mechanical impedance of the seed to come out, you require a certain thrust. So the seed thrust is important, and that is why we should have. In fact, it should not be very heavy. If it is very heavy, then also there will be problem of emergence. So we need to look into, and people have given these values. So I think this talks of the particular device, and there will be various types of these devices. Various electronics use devices have come up so that we can economize on the type of seed, mechanism, etc., which we will cover in other classes. Thank you.
We start planting the crops generally as soon as we can get what they call get on the ground, which means as soon as there's no frost in the ground, the snow's all melted, can't plant in the snow very well. But normally speaking, we start as soon as we can with peas, because they're a crop that enjoys cold weather actually at planting time. Then we move into the crops that are a little more sensitive, so you've got to wait for it to warm up a bit. Potatoes, cabbage, our bean crops, sweet corn, things like that, where you really want the weather to be sort of what you'd call a nice spring weather in order to plant those crops. The reason being because they're all from a seed other than potatoes, which is from a piece of a potato cut in quarters generally. But the seed needs some warmth in order to do a process called germination, which allows it to start growing. So you need some moisture, you need a little bit of soil heat. They've got to have that warmth to grow. Now the cabbage I mentioned grows from seed, but we actually grow them first into a plant, what we call a transplant. They're actually grown in a greenhouse, so it'd be just like the plants you might grow in your backyard in the home family garden, only on a much bigger scale. We have 20 acres behind me here of cabbage. That's a lot of cabbage. We grow asparagus, that's our first crop of the year. Asparagus is a perennial crop, which means we plant it and it's there for 10, 15, 20 years if I look after it properly. So when I say we're harvesting asparagus, that's a 6-week process. The second crop we move right into is strawberries. Then we move into summer beans. We then move into sweet corn, and then what we call early or new potatoes. Then we move into, once we get past Labor Day, then we move into what we call our fall harvest crops, which would be storage potatoes, which we'll load into storage. And then we finish the season up in the fields with cabbage that we have out right behind me here, which is all winter storage cabbage. And we market it throughout the winter months. Many of the crops we grow, we're harvesting over a period of certainly weeks, if not months.
The golden rule of transplanting vegetable seedlings in the field is this: treat them like fresh eggs. That is, be very careful. Seedlings like these that have been hardened in direct sun will have a better chance of surviving when transplanted into the field. Just before transplanting, drench the hardened seedlings with diluted liquid manure. This will help stimulate root growth and avoid transplant shock. Old seedlings like these at 7 to 8 weeks are no good, so don't plant them. Keep a safe distance between the roots and the fertiliser. A high salt concentration around the roots will burn them. When removing seedlings from the container, handle them very gently. Transplanting can be done either manually or by machine. Air dries out seedling roots and can kill them quickly. So once a seedling is out of its container, it needs to be bedded into the soil straight away. And then water around the whole base to exclude air. Try not to let the water touch the leaves. If the soil is very dry, it can suck moisture from the plant cells to the soil, the reverse of what we want. The top of the cell needs to be at ground level and the cotyledons are just above. Seven to 10 days after transplanting, apply NPK fertiliser. By this stage, it's critical for the plant to have good root ball soil contact. So you've got the old cell from the nursery and the new roots which have established in the field. Beautiful. At this stage, mulching reduces water loss and controls weeds. So whether you're transplanting by hand or machine, if you get it right, this is what your crop should look like a month after transplanting.